So hello everyone, glad to be here and thank you for providing me this opportunity, and also thank you for the nice introduction. I'm going to share a case study about what we have been doing at NITK in terms of IPv6 deployment. So before I go, I would like to acknowledge the team who has been working with us closely. We have Mike, and Nalini, of course, we mentioned earlier. So Nalini and Mike from INTC. We have Priyanka, Praneeth, Dhruv from IIESOC, and then my own colleagues at NITK, Surathkal, PG Mohanan, Ramesh Kini, Shyam S. Kamath. So this is a team that's working on. In the entire process of making this presentation, I will let you know how we came together with IIESOC, how did we get in touch with IIESOC, and what have we done after getting in touch with them, what we were doing before that. So I'm talking right now to all of you from the edge here. So right in front of my room, I have the sea beach view. That's an Arabian Sea. This campus is located at the beach in Mangalore in Karnataka. For those who might not be aware of where is exactly Surathkal. So Surathkal is a small town and it has many different industries. So one of them is MRPL. Then we have academic institutions like NITK and Manipal. Everyone is nearby. So this is a geographic location in India from where I'm currently talking to you. And this is our campus map. And currently we have roughly about 45,000 devices in the campus. And I'm involved up to a certain extent in the data center management of my institute besides my teaching work. And this is a campus which is spread across 300 acres. And one of the challenges was, how do we migrate to IPv6? Before we go there, let me tell you what was our motivation to migrate to IPv6. So this is about 2017-18 timeframe, much before the COVID era, that we wanted to migrate to IPv6 because one of our newly developed application, which we launched, crashed on day one. And on deeper analysis and debugging, we identified that the primary reason why that application failed was because the NAT box that we were using, that is the network address translation box that we were using, was a pretty old one, and it got choked, and then it started dropping all the packets. And that kind of affected the performance of that application, and we thought there was a problem with the application. So we were actually debugging application and not the network part. But later we identified that application was working fine. We also had all our other servers working fine, but then we realized that the major problem was with the NAT box. So then the first question that came in our mind was, can we avoid NAT? Dhruv already mentioned, to allow IPv4 to be used for a longer period of time, we came up with the solutions like NAT. But then NAT has become, is being prominently used almost in all enterprises, universities, or any kind of a network. So our question was, go for a expensive NAT device, which can now handle the load, or you go with IPv6. And then somebody just made a comment, okay, let's think about going to IPv6. That was good. And it was a positive move. But the biggest problem was, how do we get started? So we got stuck, and then we were not able to move forward. Of course, we had to do a lot of literature review reading, which was not possible because all of us are academicians. We have our other duties. So for example, I'm mentoring 4 to 5 PhD students. I have 4 to 5 master's students. I have BTech courses to handle, master's courses to handle. We have to write papers. We have to write proposal grants. There are so many other activities that we do that it was not possible for us to go read all about IPv6 and then think about deploying it. So that idea kind of died. But then came COVID-19, which again challenged our network because immense amount of load came on the network. And we know what happened during the COVID time. Internet was the only probably thing that was working without any hindrances. So one thing is, many a times we don't realize, but universities have a large variety of user requirements. So we need basic internet services in a university, that is fine, but we need also highly customized features for academic R&D. So just before the COVID time, one of our faculty member requested for a static IP allocation because that faculty member was involved in an IoT related R&D activity and the faculty member mentioned that I have to bypass NET, otherwise my services will not work. And this is an R&D project funded by some organization. I need to show them the proof of concept. Please bypass NET and give me a static public IP. Now, if more and more faculty members or more and more researchers keep asking for such kind of requirements or highly customized features, it becomes extremely difficult as a person managing the network inside the campus to give services of this type and give static public IP allocations to all the people. And we don't know, they might request for a POC, that is a proof of concept, but then they might want to hold that IP for about a few months. Now that might not be possible if you have very limited IPv4 which you have received from your ISP. So that was one of the reasons we said, okay, this is high time that we should go to IPv6. Second thing, as I said, COVID-19 led to the adoption of totally new teaching learning methodologies. Everything went on to happen remote, including mechanical laboratories were handled remotely. So for example, at NITK, we are a member of NME ICT funded project called Virtual and Remote Triggered Laboratories. This is a project that was started way back in 2006, where the idea is to have simulations of labs, also have remote triggered labs. So sitting anywhere in the world using an internet connection, you can use a web interface and you can actually trigger mechanical equipment, like for example, a pendulum. So we have a pendulum at NITK, which is connected to the internet, and through a web interface, when you click on it, the pendulum oscillates and the web interface gives you what was the frequency of its oscillation. Now you know that the length of the pendulum matters the frequency. So what you do is you increase the length or decrease the length, re-trigger the pendulum oscillation, and then see how the frequency of oscillation changes. So all of these things were done over the internet, and all of these labs came very handy when COVID pandemic hit, and everything became online. Entire study became online. Exams became online. And that required a lot of scalability in the network and very high throughput. This literally challenged our network at NITK. Of course, we did not find any difficulties, but we realized that if this is going to sustain for more than 2 to 3 years, then probably we will have to go, and restructure our entire network, because we saw a lot of problems happening. And again, the main performance potential bottleneck, what we observed was NAT. So this was the time then we thought, let's think about migrating to IPv6. Let's start looking out for help. Another thing we noted is many people told during the pandemic that you can't procure more servers now because shipments were not moving. No products were shipping from any part of the world to any other part of the world. In such cases, when you have to scale up, the only option was you pay and get the cloud services. But being from a government institution, moving to cloud is also not so easy, because all the government data need not be put up on the cloud openly. But things like Moodle can definitely be put up on cloud. So we thought, okay, shall we migrate our Moodle application to cloud? But then we realized, yes, we can do that. Soon, cloud providers will begin to charge for IPv6 addresses in future. And we don't know whether currently they are charging or currently they are not charging. For example, when I was looking through AWS, and even Dhruv mentioned it in one of his slides, that AWS has a good IPv6 support. So I was one day practicing how AWS will support IPv6. Can I configure my VPC to use IPv6? And I saw one of the important features that I found in AWS was that it allows us to use our own IPv6 address block in AWS. If you don't want to take IPv6 or v4 from AWS, that's fine. You can use your own IPv6 blocks if possible. So that was a great feature, and we thought, okay, why not we have our own IPv6 block? And that will also help us in our R&D work that is happening, because as Raidu sir already mentioned, the field of IoT is driving the IPv6 deployments as well, because all of our IoT applications are expected to work on IPv6. And the same holds true for the machine-to-machine communication. So this was quite a decent enough motivation for us to move. But while I was doing more survey, I identified one important thing, that it's very important for us to be IPv6 ready. I can quote some live examples here. So being IPv6 ready for the universities, because we already have all our ISPs migrating to IPv6, they have a motivation to do that. Like Dhruv said, not many enterprises want to migrate to IPv6 because they don't see a business case. Universities are slightly different than enterprises, although they might be of the same size in terms of networks, but the motivation and the significance has to be different. what I identified was that being IPv6 ready for the university can be immensely beneficial, and actually it can lead to technological growth. For example, I identified that National Science Foundation in US had a proposal which was called, so National Science Foundation is like our DST in India, the Department of Science and Technology, which gives grants to the grants for R&D work. This National Science Foundation's project was about campus infrastructure, innovation, and engineering. And this program clearly mentioned in the call for applications, you need to discuss about the IPv6 deployment at your campus. That was one of the requirements which was mentioned in the call for proposal itself. So imagine if we do not think about IPv6 and we do not, we just say, okay, there is time, we will do it later. Potentially one fine day, even Government of India can come up with some kind of project calls where they will say, do you have IPv6? If not, do you have a plan to migrate to IPv6? If so, please mention, and then only you will be eligible, for example, to participate in these kind of programs. And you have already seen Government of India is putting a lot of effort in terms of, motivating people to migrate to IPv6. And you can already see, Mr. Raidu already mentioned that, IPv6, India is leading in terms of deployment, but we don't want to miss out on that edge. We need to push more. So another thing is, by migrating to IPv6, universities can gain a competitive edge. You can have research partnerships with international universities or other enterprises, and the funding for R&D and partnerships are key parameters in our ranking these days. Everyone today in India is aware what is NIRF ranking. And if you want to put a strong position in NIRF ranking for your university, soon IPv6 deployments can be one of the metric, or at least seeing how a university is putting an effort towards IPv6 can be very crucial. So this is the significance of being IPv6 ready. Now, as I mentioned, I will be discussing about what are the challenges that we faced in getting started with IPv6. We did give a thought about it in 2018 timeframe. We did not know how to do it, but this was the time that we thought, okay, let's try and see if we can pull it off. First thing that we understood was we had zero knowledge in practical about how IPv6 works and how we should migrate our campus to IPv6. It sounds very simple when we say migrating from IPv4 to IPv6, but when you put your hands into the actual deployment is when you realize, oh, how do I get started? What is the first thing that I should be doing? Second, what is the migration strategy should I use? Should I just go to IPv6 only? Should I go for dual stack? That means use IPv6 when possible, otherwise fall back to IPv4, or use tunneling mechanisms, or use translation mechanisms. There are so many questions that come in front of us when we think about migrating to IPv6. And IPv6 adoption in India in mobile ISP networks has been very good, but we haven't seen such cases for universities, and which is why I put together this slide deck for sharing our deployment as a case study. Another important thing that I've noticed was there is very little publicly information available about any Indian university that migrated to IPv6. When I go to Google or go to any other search engine and try to find out which are the universities that have even attempted to migrate to IPv6, we see a few institutions that attempted to migrate to IPv6. They planned for it. Their presentation slide decks are available, but further updates are not available, whether they actually migrated to IPv6, whether they hit a roadblock or they are in the process currently. Such kind of information is currently not available, particularly when we come for Indian universities. So that was around the time frame. This was 2020, October time frame. I had just started interacting with Dhruv and members of II ESOC and participated in just one or two RFCs We Love event that Dhruv mentioned. And in October, I get a message because I was a member of II ESOC. I get an email from the II ESOC email address that II ESOC has received a grant from ISIF Asia. And one of the goal was to do IPv6 webinars. That means help people understand what is IPv6, how it works, and what you might have to do to migrate. So this was a very important opportunity for all of us, particularly our staff members at NITK, to become familiar with IPv6 without doing a lot of reading by yourself, because experts like Nalini and Mike were not only giving the theory sessions, but they were following it up with the lab sessions as well. So our team enrolled, I still remember more than 15, 16 people enrolled from NITK, and we were like waiting for this opportunity that, okay, somebody please teach us IPv6. Second thing that I found interesting is IIESOC team mentioned that if anybody is willing to migrate to IPv6, they will give us help, technical assistance. And I immediately enrolled. So NITK Surathkal, I took the permission and I immediately submitted an expression of interest. And I said, NITK wants to participate in this particular project. And believe me, we got the perfect start that we wanted for this. Webinars were conducted by IIESOC and INTC. Our training, our staff got the training. We did hands-on session. The first step thing that we did after understanding all of this is, what is important for us is to understand whether our local upstream provider, which is BSNL in our case, whether they support IPv6 or not. So we checked with them and they said, yes, we support IPv6. Then we said, okay, how do we lease IPv6 addresses? Should we ask BSNL to provide us IPv6 addresses, or should we go to NITK, the National Internet Exchange of India, to lease IPv6 addresses directly from them? These were some questions that started coming in our mind. But as Nalini, Mike, and Dhruv suggested during the webinars, we configured a small testbed, first of all, at NITK to become acquainted with the functionality of IPv6, because we had never played earlier with IPv6. So it was very important for us that we set up a small testbed, maybe with just 5-6 machines. And our staff was very cooperative. They immediately set up a testbed and we started playing around with that testbed. Later, we prepared an inventory of our network equipments, how many access points we have, how many switches we have, how many L2 switches, L3 switches, how many routers, how many outdoor access points, indoor access points, what are the applications that we have, which platforms are we running? For example, some machines were running MATLAB. What are the network management tools are you using? For example, somebody might be using OpenNMP, the Open Network Management. And there are so many other things that we had to prepare a list. And then we started checking one by one, which of our equipments do not support IPv6, or which of our applications will need a special interest or special time in terms of migrating those applications to IPv6. What are the platforms we use? Will those platforms be a bottleneck for us to migrate to IPv6? What are the monitoring and management tools that we are using? What will be the problem if we switch to IPv6? Will these monitoring and network management tools continue to work, or will there be any problem that we will face? So all these questions started coming, and we started interacting more with IIESOC and INTC and went back to them with all of these questions. And we are very thankful that they always helped us in giving us the right set of suggestions. For example, here now, so let me share some of the experiences, what we have faced and what decisions we took. These might not be always holding true for everyone who is listening here, but this is just our case study. First of all, we decided to go ahead with dual stack because we observed that there was very little complexity in deployment of IPv6 and management of IPv6 if you go with dual stack. The amount of expertise that you need for IPv6 deployment with dual stack is much lesser than what you would go for other technologies for migration. What we also did is, again, thanks to the fact that students were not in campus because of COVID-19, we started experimenting. After we set up the experiments on our small test bed, then we started doing experiments directly on the campus network. We took one virtual LAN at a time and started using IPv6 to see what breaks and what works. And the fact that this risk was taken by us is because there were extremely few users in the campus LAN. And we ensured that we used only those LANs which had like minimal users in the campus. Because of course, faculty members, their family, because we have a residential campus, everybody was in campus. So we did not affect that VLAN. We just went ahead with ensuring that the VLANs that are not being used were the ones that we tried for experimenting. One of the favorite thing that I liked in this experiment, my hands-on session was on DHCP-v6 server configuration. I truly enjoyed configuring DHCP server, looking at the leases file, looking at the log file. Initially, we started with stateless auto configuration, Slack, but eventually we moved to DHCP-v6 and we started using Kia server. And my experience of using DHCP-v6 was very good. So much so that I actually, ended up giving one talk. So I said that IIESOC and INTC were giving IPv6 webinar series, and a theory session was followed by lab. So if you looked at the list that Dhruv presented a moment ago, there were theory topics followed by lab topics. One of the theory topic was DHCP-v6, which Nalini covered. And the corresponding lab for DHCP v6 was handled by me. And the YouTube links and the slides for those are also available in the same link which Dhruv was presenting. So I was glad that I was able to give back something to IIESOC and INTC in the favor of all the support that they have extended to us. And I also delivered a session, as I already told you, I also delivered a session on how virtual private cloud in AWS can be enabled to support IPv6. And that's the time that I identified that we can use our own IPv6 address block in AWS if we want. Another thing that we realized is something that took us a lot of time, and thanks again to the team that helped us from IISOC and INTC, is address planning. It will take several iterations. The first iteration will definitely require a lot of changes, and it has to be done very carefully. So what I thought is, as a last part of my presentation here, I will just like to show sample address plan that we put up at NITK. So what we did is we decided to go for a /32 address block, and I'll tell you how we plan to use the remaining bits for our campus. So the first 8 bits we have reserved, for example, for sites. So NITK Surathkal right now has one campus in Surathkal town, but soon there are plans to have other campuses. There might be a campus in Bangalore in future. There can be another campus maybe 50 kilometers away from currently where I am sitting. We also need to have disaster recovery sites for each campus to be separately managed, so that if the network in the original campus goes down, the data can be recovered from the DR site, and then the network can be brought up again, the data can be restored again. So we have kept separate options for disaster recovery for both the campuses. If we have the third campus coming in, then we will have a DR for the third campus as well. And then we might want to go to cloud. And if we go to services like AWS or any other cloud, if they permit us to use our IPv6 address block, we would prefer to use that rather than paying separate money for those IPv4 or IPv6 addresses that they might charge. And we also kept some bits for reserved purposes for future. The next 8 bits, we thought we will do it for different sections and divisions. The examples are, there can be a separate academic section, there's a separate administration section, there are separate central computer sections, research centers, residential areas, which includes hostels, boys hostels about 12 to 15, girls hostels about 5 to 6, guest houses about 4 to 5, and hundreds of faculty quarters. Then we can also cover up sports and recreational separate facilities that we have in the campus. And again, some bits have been kept reserved for future. The next 8 bits might be required for buildings within the section. So you can see that the address plan has been done in such a way that the route aggregation will be simplified and you will see a better performance overall. So the next 8 bits we reserved for buildings. The next 8 bits we reserved for VLANs inside every building. And the last 64 bits can be used for the host interfaces. So totally you can see 4 octets plus 64, 96 bits. And then IPv6 is 128. So if you subtract 96 from 128, you get 32 bits. So we wanted to go ahead with /32 address block. We followed up the process, which I'm going to describe next, and then tell you what did we end up doing. How can you lease IPv6 addresses? Now you know after the address plan that you need /32. Okay, you have reached to that conclusion that you need /32, but what next? Where will you get it from? So there are 2 options that you can take. Option 1, check whether your ISP can provide IPv6 addresses for your network. In our case, it was BSNL, and BSNL says yes. They said that we will be able to provide you an IPv6 address block, but you might want to check with your ISP whether they will provide or not. So only one important point to note here in this option 1 is, if you change the ISP in future, remember that the IPv6 address block that they gave you will go away. And when you move to a new ISP, that new ISP will give you a different IPv6 address block. So you might have to change your IPv6 address blocks in case you move from one ISP to another. Or if you have already a multi-homing feature in your campus, that means you are already having services from multiple ISPs, then it's okay. Then you don't have a problem even if one ISP leaves, because the other ISP is still there. But second option is the one that we preferred at NITK, and let me explain to you what it is. You can directly lease the IPv6 address block from NICS. You don't need to necessarily only get IPv6 address block from your ISP. you can talk to your ISP about your plan. So we spoke to BSNL and we told them that we want to get our IPv6 address block directly from NITK and not from you. But we will need your readiness in terms of running BGP, setting up the routes for our IPv6 address block. And they said, yes, no problem. Even if you go and take IPv6 address block from us, we are okay. If you get it directly from NITK, we will provide you all the routing support. So what I'm telling is that before you decide to go for option 2, it's very important to talk to your ISP and tell them about your plans and know about the fact that whether they are ready to support you if you get directly IPv6 address block from NITK. Most of them will. There's no reason why they won't. Then if you are ready with this and you have spoken to the ISP and you decided what is the address block you need, for example, in our case /32, you need to submit an application to IRIN. IRIN is Indian Registry for Internet Names and Numbers. The website is irinn.in. And it's a division of NITK, which leases address blocks, IPv4 or ASN numbers or IPv6. And this entire process will require you to sign an agreement with IRIN. You'll have to submit the KYC documents to them. And you will also have to submit a justification, give your campus topology, tell them how big is your network, and then finally you have to pay the fees as well. So before we submit it, so KYC documents is not a problem. Agreement signing is a straightforward process. Paying the fees is also not an issue. The main time will be needed for you to prepare a good address plan. The one that I just demonstrated to you, 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 64. So planning it properly. And why are you asking for /32? Why not /48? You need to justify that. So that justification is something that might take time, but you can always start preparing that justification sooner so that you can have several iterations of it before you submit it to NITK. Now, what is the cost of leasing IPv6 addresses? If you go for option 1 and you directly take it from your ISP, then it depends on the ISP. Since we did not go for that option, I have not much visibility into the fact as to how much do they charge for IPv6 if you go via an ISP. But for option 2, the information is pretty clearly available on the IRIN website. I have given the link here. I'll share the slide deck with Raidu sir and the team from ISOC so that they can forward it to all the interested participants. If you go to this fee structure, they very clearly explain if you are asking /32, then how much will you have to pay? If you're going for IPv4, how much you have to pay? And if you're going for IPv6 /48, how much will you pay? Only one thing to note is that if you are a new affiliate for IRIN, that means you have never dealt with any other things with IRIN before. You have to give one-time sign-up fee, which was 25,000 until recently in December 2021. From this January 2022, they have increased it to 27,500. So even this PDF, I think it is an old number. The fees has been hiked up by like about 4,000 or 5,000. And for us, for example, we followed this whole process and we got a /32 from NITK. And I think we paid this 27,500 and we paid 44,000 for IPv6 /32, which is a recurring fee. This is one-time fee. You don't have to pay again and again. It's just first time, 27,500. Next time onwards, you have to just pay 44. So we paid 27,500 plus we paid 44. Plus there was a 30% discount available at that time when we were applying. I think it's still available if I'm not wrong. And 30% on the 44,000 that we paid for IPv6. 30% is not on this 27,500. So we got that discount. I don't remember the number. I might be mistaken with 10% to 30%, but you can check it on the website. It's available. And by the way, if you don't know how much you have to pay, you can always use a fee calculator, which is here. And you can go to that. I can show it to you here. Maybe somebody can quickly tell me whether my browser is changing and you are able to see the IRIN website. Can somebody quickly confirm? Is my website visible? IRIN website visible? The tab?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. So
yes,
this is
visible.
Okay, thank you. This is the website irin.in. And if you go to this button, it will explain the process for you to apply for new IP addresses. Then what KYC documents you need, then how much does it cost? Who can become an IRIN affiliate? If you are a university, you can definitely become. How to make payments. So very systematic process has been put up here. And IPv6 subnet calculator, if you need any help Fee calculator, again, if you need any assistance with that. So this is a nice little website that I would recommend people to go through if you are thinking about migrating to IPv6 at your university. Moving to the next steps, and where we look forward to the support from all of you, is that next at NITK, now we are going ahead with the IPv6 application conversion. So for example, we have our own MIS, which we maintain, and we have built it from scratch at NITK. So we are thinking to migrate that soon, about 1 or 2 months. We also want to prepare a template for IPv6 deployment that can be used by other universities, because this was something that was not available to us when we were looking out on the internet. We did not find any template wherein any university has explained how they migrated to IPv6. So we are aware of what are the questions that anybody would get when they migrate to IPv6, their entire campus. And we want to kind of prepare all those things in a proper template. Also prepare an FAQ. What are the questions that they will get? For example, I already asked some questions. How should I get IPv6 address? Where should I lease it from? Second question, how much does it cost? Third, how do I apply to NITK, or how do I ask my ISP? So all of those things are something that we want to put up in an FAQ. Also possibly set up an IPv6 lab, which is focused on enterprises and universities. So for example, if we have this lab set up, then we can provide this lab to other universities for them to practice on this lab first before they go off migrating into their production network. Also, we want to reach out to some other universities who we are not aware, but they might have an experience of migrating to IPv6. So listening to those universities and collaborating with those universities will definitely be a plus for us, because we are still not fully migrated. We have just got a block from NITK. We have started the application conversion. We have to consider the security issues. We have to do testing whether our IPv6 deployment is indeed successful. So we have still a long way to go. So we will be very open to collaborating with any universities, and any suggestion from the community would be much appreciated. I would like to end this presentation by acknowledging sincerely the thanks, the support that IIESOC and INTC have given us. Our team at NITK, we attended these webinars, which were organized by IIESOC and INTC, and thanks also to ISF Asia for the grant that they had given to IIESOC and INTC. We want to further work closely with IIESOC and INTC and reach out with this document, which I mentioned in my previous slide. So again, I'm taking help from the experts at IIESOC and INTC so that we can prepare a good, nice template which can be provided to the community, and we can share our knowledge by that means. So that's it from my side. I hope I have not taken too much time, 12:15. So thank you very much for giving me an opportunity, and me and Dhruv will be open to take any questions if there are any. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Mohit. It was an excellent talk and migrating to IPv6 and the required nitty-gritties. Before we go for a Q&A, I request all the participants to switch on their cameras. So let's take a picture. All of you, please switch on your cameras. Yeah, some more are yet to switch on. All of you, please switch on the cameras. Okay, thank you. Now let's have a Q&A session. You can ask questions directly or key in the chat boxes. Yes, Mr. Maruti, please unmute yourself and ask question.
I can see there's a question in the chat also. What was the reason to migrate from stateless to stateful DHCP-v6? Okay, so with stateless DHCP, what happens is you do not have a track of who has been given what kind of IPv6 addresses. And in an academic setup, or in for that sake, any university setup or any enterprise setup, what is important is the traceability. So for example, you want to know which IP address is given to it. So we wanted to maintain that state information going forward in the long run at our university, so that one important thing to note is that when you go with IPv6, you are giving public global IPv6 addresses to all your clients inside the network. So in our case, our clients are faculty members or students. So if you would like to know what a specific IPv6 is involved in any kind of activity that is being done by students or faculty members, you want to maintain the state information about it. You do not want to lose that information, because at any point, if there is a query that, okay, at this point in time, we identified this IPv6 address was doing this activity, we want to know which machine or who was allocated that IPv6 address at that time. What I'm trying to convey in short is that we want the state information to be maintained. Otherwise, it can be a problem in traceability. So that's the reason that we wanted to go with stateful DHCP. Another thing is, stateless was just for our experimental purposes. We just wanted to quickly see, without getting too much into the details of stateful DHCP-v6, because you can go and see my YouTube presentation. You will see that running a stateless DHCP is very easy. So from management point of view, or from the deployment perspective, it's super easy to run a Slack. But point is, you do not have all the information that you might want at a later stage. You will not have logs. You will not know which IPv6 addresses have been leased for how much time and to whom. So we always wanted to go with stateful DHCP. We just started off with Slack to keep it simple in our experimentation phase, and then migrate to stateful DHCP so that we can handle the complexity one at a time. That was the main reason. So I hope that answers question from Mr. Amaryad. Yeah.
This is Maruti from IIT Hyderabad. So, sir, I have one question regarding NAT translation. So, did you disable NAT translation altogether, or you are still doing NAT translation?
No,
because NAT acts as a security layer, in my opinion. Even we switch to IPv6, right?
So that is a very important question. So basically, one of the important questions that we also faced it, NAT kind of naturally gives immunity to your network. It keeps your applications and your clients safer from all the attacks that can happen. And now when you try to avoid NAT and just make your network openly accessible, so any device in your network then becomes openly accessible on the internet, that throws a lot of security challenges, right? So INTK and IISOC have conducted a nice little survey. Maybe I can share that link with you. We want to understand from people who have such kind of concerns. At NITK, we haven't yet reached to the point where we have actually deployed IPv6. As I said, we were just playing around internally in our network with IPv6. We haven't yet gone out of NITK. Okay, so we had to first get that /32 or whatever IPv6 address blocked so that they are routable. What we were playing ahead with were just private IPv6, which cannot be routed on the global internet. We have to only play within the campus network. But now when we have the global IPv6 block allotted to us, now we can actually start going out of NITK, which we haven't done because first we need to migrate our applications. However, in such a case, when you're and another thing is we have gone for dual stack. So our IPv4 will still be going via the NAT itself. It cannot be changed. But what we are also planning to do is that an important step when you try to make your network totally public with IPv6 is how seriously we configure the firewall. So that plays a very important role, and how much controlled access you want to provide to that IPv6. Because for example, even if you see in IRIB, they're very clearly written, any misuse of the resources, because after all, these are national resources. IPv6 is a national resource, which we have leased for some money every year. So we can't misuse it. This specific IPv6 address, which belongs to Government of India, cannot be involved in any kind of illegitimate activity, right? So you will have to have a very tight control on your firewall configuration and do it properly so as your public IPv6 addresses do not get exploited. But as I said, right now, in the steps to be followed, first was to play around with IPv6, become familiar, ask for an address, then migrate applications, then think about security. So our next step after application migration will be to go for security considerations. And I can share that survey in case you would like to take a look at that, as to what are different things that will come into consideration. So for example, let me give you an example. Many a times, many people use DNS for blacklisting the malicious URLs, correct? But now what happens is in DNS, your IPv6 length becomes pretty long, 96 bits extra as compared to IPv4, right? So now scanning that entire DNS blacklist which you have prepared can be a very big task because of matching the IPv6 addresses, right? So many a times the spam blockers were implemented using DNS blacklist, block listing or blacklisting, they call it both. We haven't done that here, but I'm just giving an idea that these kinds of things have to be rethought before we go to actual public network with this IPv6 addresses over there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any further questions?
Yes, sir. So Jesse from IIT Hyderabad. So this is Jesse from IIT Hyderabad.
Yes.
So I have one question. What is the DNS server are you using for this IPv6 DNS server? Which DNS server are you using? Is it something?
Yeah, so we can use one which we are using right now at NITK is Unbound. We are using TinyDNS and Unbound currently.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we have. We were using that same one for our IPv4 part also. We have just enabled the IPv6 configuration into that.
Okay. Fine, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Any more questions, please?
I have none in the chat. There are no questions in the chat, at least. I checked it again.
Yeah, please.
No questions yet.
Okay. Dear friends, if you want to become part of our working group on IPv6, you are welcome. You can write to us. We will make you members of our working group. I think you have our mail ID and contact number. I will post it in the chat box here.
Yeah, I have also put up the IPv6 webinars link where you can find there are two phases. This second phase is about the second grant that IIESOC has received from ICF Asia. And if you would like to get updates from us about as to what we are doing at IIESOC, you can just become a member and you will start getting email updates about our events that we do. And do check out the Connections IPv6 track there was a very healthy discussions around IPv6, even in connections that Drew mentioned, which was in the first week of April. So that's it from my side. Thanks to the ISOC Hyderabad for giving us an opportunity to share this experience.
Thank you, Mohit. Now I request Bala Pedigari, our chapter secretary, to propose a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohan. And that is a pretty exciting talk series by Dhruv and Mohit. Thanks to both of you for wonderfully conducting the overall understanding space of IPv6 and the need and purpose related to the IPv6. The most important thing which I always feel that today is as the billions of devices are growing everlasting, it's very important that every device which need to be connected to the internet need to carry the IP address, and IPv6 is the solution for such kind of a situation what we are getting into, because we are already into the stage of address space exhaustion, and IPv6 is trying to help us to solve that problem. And thank you, Drew, for bringing out a very important and efficient and effective knowledge associated to the state of IPv6 in the current world, and with the kind of bodies which are working towards the same, like IETF, ISOC, and INIC and other things. And thank you, Mohit, for clearly articulating the entire space of IPv6 migration, taking your own experience into the consideration and establishing the context of the NIT Surathkal, and walking us through that entire journey of IPv6 migration, what you guys have done. And the experience story was really very awesome. In fact, it was more clear for many people, I believe, if they wanted to carry out such kind of an exercise. And I believe you are going to bring out the fact, frequently asked questions, which will really help the other people to follow in that path. Thank you, Mohit, for providing us that view and also answering the questions to the audience. And over and above, I thank Mohan Raidu for bringing out this continuous initiative of the Internet Society in conducting this particular webinars, which is making a bigger impact in this part of the region, and also helping people to gain awareness of the Internet Society functions and the importance of the internet in today's context. Thank you, Mohan Garu. And I also thank Adesh for carrying out that introductory part and also setting the context in this entire journey. And thank you, Kanaka Durga, for driving the introduction, and all the members of the Internet Society Hyderabad chapter who played a key role. And over and above, all the participants who took their time to join this particular conversation of the IPv6 needs, issues, and the process, so that you have a clear view of the same. Thank you for being part of this initiative. Thank you all. With that closing note, I hand it over to Mohan Raidu for providing the closing remarks and close the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala. It was an excellent program. Because it's a working day, and though many more people have registered, I think because of the working timings, more could not join this, but we will be in touch with them. We have their contacts. We'll share our proceedings with them. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Nice day.